Well, hooray and hallelujah. And welcome to Tom Rhodes Radio's Smart Camp. And greetings from another beautiful day in captivity. I hope you're safe and happy and keeping mentally strong wherever you're at. It's starting to get hot here in Los Angeles. My mother and I have been going on these daily walks. And, little sound of the phone. And it's getting a little hot now. And like my father, I'm too cheap to run the air conditioning.
You don't really need it. There's a nice wind that blows here.
Yeah, I think maybe as soon as we get to June, probably start turning on the air conditioning.
Well, I definitely will mention it when it gets too hot for me.
But today we walked to Target, and what a luxury to go to Target. This was the first time you've been there.
Yes.
You're just starting to go out with me, and how'd you feel going into Target today?
Well, it felt kind of like things were coming back to normal. There weren't that many people there, and we were pretty conscious of others around us, so we were trying to do the 6 feet, trying to stay away from each other by 6 feet, and I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, but I mean, it feels like there's some kind of normalcy.
Yeah.
In going to the store, doesn't it feel good just to go there and pick some?
It was really, really good, and you know that Target that you go to is not exactly the one I go to. In Oviedo, Florida, I always remember my daughter wanting to go to Target. She'd call me up and say, "Hey, I'm going to Target. You want to come?" And we'd go, and she would just shop and shop. She would out-shop me, hands down.
So she loved Target.
She loved Target.
Should we mention now? I don't think I mentioned the first month we were here. I actually went to the Target and bought my mom underwear. I think I did say that because I told
Yes,
the
you
woman
did.
no lace or anything. But we've been walking up and down these streets in my neighborhood, just kind of like mowing the grass. We're going up and down different streets every day. La Brea, Detroit, Sierra Bonita, Curson, Stanley,
I was so
Ogden,
amazed.
Orange Grove Avenue.
I was so amazed at, mostly what I've seen of Los Angeles was just the main roads and up to when we started walking the neighborhoods. And I thought it was kind of an ugly city, other than, the Grove was kind of cool. And the farmer's market was kind of cool. I didn't go around too much. I can't say I know Los Angeles. I don't. But since we've been walking in the neighborhood, I love to look at gardens and what people plant. And it's been amazing. Just the side streets are beautiful. And we just walk and you get to see a lot more than if you're riding.
Well, we've seen so many beautiful flowers, and I've taken pictures of them. I've texted them to my girlfriend, and then she's texted back the name of the flower. And I was like, wow, how do you know that so quickly? And so there's an app called Picture This, and you can put a picture into it, and it tells you whatever it is. So we've seen Peruvian orchids.
Peruvian daffodil.
Peruvian daffodil. Wow,
Whoever
those were
heard
beautiful.
of such a thing?
And what was the blue with the cross on it?
That was a passion flower.
Blue passion flower.
But I did know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Just beautiful flowers and plants in the neighborhood.
And the blue trees. The
jacaranda trees.
They're just beautiful.
They're purple.
Yeah,
they're
purple.
all over Los Angeles.
They're all
they're
over.
in bloom right now. And it's my favorite time in Los Angeles when there's they're kind of like purple flower petals on the trees, and when they fall off, there's all these purple petals all over the streets, and it's just absolutely stunning. And I got the seeds, and I'm actually growing a jacaranda tree on my balcony. I think 3 or 4 years now, and it's about 4 feet tall.
Yes, it's doing well.
And we've enjoyed the updated COVID graffiti on Melrose Avenue.
Oh, it's really been terrific. And go ahead and talk for a minute.
I lost my mom. And, another thing is, I live right next to the Grove, which is this expensive outdoor shopping area. And it's kind of cool. We've had the entire grove to ourselves, and there's the same fountain in Las Vegas, in front of the Bellagio, these famous fountains in Las Vegas. There is the same people made a little fountain like that in the grove, and it's kind of cool. We've had the whole neighborhood to ourselves, and it's like the grove for the last 2 months has just been neighborhood people enjoying the grove. And I've thought about that, and I was communicating with a friend of mine in Amsterdam, because Dutch people always say they wish they could get rid of the tourists in Amsterdam. So now their wish has come true. Everybody is getting to enjoy their own neighborhoods right now. So yesterday when we were walking through, I've been looking at the news a little bit, but we haven't been overloading on the news. And yesterday in the Grove, there was a TV news crew from CBS Evening News was setting up, and this the newswoman reporter said that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has just opened California, but the stores they're allowed to open, but the employees are reluctant to return. So I think that's kind of cool. We get our news from...
We just have to walk to this grove and find out all the latest news.
What's happening. Yeah, and then this bar, there's a bar right next to the fountains, and the guy was restocking it. And this is the first time we've seen employees other than security people there for 2 months. And I asked the guy when they were opening, and he said June 1st. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe the Grove and the Farmers Market in Los Angeles might be opening up on June 1st.
More and more stores seems to be opening up around the Farmers Market. But what I wanted to share was the cool messages we get to see.
There's great stencil graffiti on the sidewalks.
And yes, and I wanted to share a couple of those where it said, one said, "You make me smile, dance with life, you are my superhero." And there was one that you weren't aware of where it says, "No scooter riding on sidewalk, it's the law."
That's great. And there, I didn't even think about it. A few years ago, there was scooters everywhere in the neighborhood, and they were littered everywhere. And now you don't see many of the scooters. So I didn't know. Oh, and that's a good one you took a picture of. It's a skull, like a skull and crossbone. And there's a spoon and a syringe crossing underneath the skull head. So it's kind of a, poison warning, don't do heroin, it'll kill you, graffiti.
Okay, then
that's cool.
There was another one. I've been taking photos all day today on this. Social media is selling your shit. So,
Social media is selling your shit. And
yes.
We're allowed to cuss.
I'm sorry. Okay, here's another one. Some nights, the only thing you need is tequila and a friend who doesn't judge you.
Ha, ha, ha.
That is a good one.
That's beautiful.
And
then the billboard, it said, "Thank you to the social distancers." Okay, Mom, we don't need to talk about every picture you've taken, but
I liked it.
the stencil graffiti on the sidewalks is fascinating, but. And a real cool thing about the neighborhood, it balances out the...
negative stuff.
Well, like I saw a homeless guy taking a shit on the side of my building last week.
That was bad.
And there's Pan Pacific Park is right there, and I could see the public restrooms were open. So I'm sure that was the thing. And then I wasn't going to mention this, but it's so funny. When we were walking back from CVS 3 or 4 days ago, there was a human turd on the sidewalk with a cigarette butt in it. And I thought, wow, there's a real poignant sign of these times.
You shouldn't have talked about that one.
Maybe it's an art installation. Maybe it's the new Banksy. That's what I was thinking. So it's a good neighborhood, but there are definitely some big city elements to it. Mm. But we got a lot of things to talk about. Still been listening to a lot of country music, especially the Jimmy Rogers. So forgive us if either one of us on this podcast starts yodeling. Yodelay-hoo, yodelay-hoo, yodelay-hoo.
Well, I'm not.
And that's one thing we forgot to talk about when we talked about the country music, is how yodeling became a part of country music. So Jimmy Rogers yodeled in his songs, and then Hank Williams got the yodeling from him, and yodeling has been this theme in country music that, but it comes from Switzerland.
Yep.
So at one time there was some Swiss immigrants coming to the United States, and they yodeled, and somehow it made its way into country music. But a very important story I wanted to tell you that I forgot on the last episode when we talked about country music was back in Orlando, I had a friend named Jamaican Johnny. And everybody called him that because he was from Jamaica. So Jamaican Johnny, wonderful guy, one of my oldest friends in Orlando, and his mother died. And he was at her house, and this was, I don't know, like maybe 10, 15 years ago. And he invited me to stop by his house. And you remember that house. It was by the
yes.
that beautiful fruit stand we would always go to in that neighborhood. I think that's where I fell in love with produce stands. That
was a really nice place. We used to go there quite a bit, and the stuff was so fresh that different chefs would go there to get things.
Yeah, it was a wonderful neighborhood.
It was wonderful. And then they shut it down, and it's been empty ever since.
Still an empty parking lot.
Yep.
So her house was like a half a mile from there, and it was a small one-story, like kind of cinder block Florida house. But she had grown all of these plants all over it. And they're just the most beautiful plants, like climbing the whole house was covered in and surrounded by plants. It was absolutely beautiful what she did with it. And after she died, and then when Johnny died, the people who were going to sell it cut down all those plants.
Yes, that's kind of
And we
shame.
drove by there, and there was no plants on the house. And
It definitely didn't look the same.
this the loving touch this woman put on this house for 30 years. So my friend Johnny, when he invited me over to his mother's house after she died, he said, I know you like vinyl records, and I don't have any use for these, and you can take whatever you want. And so I looked through these records of this old black woman from Jamaica who had lived in this house for, 40, 50 years or something. And she had the greatest old country records. She had Hank Snow, like a Bing Crosby doing Home on the Range. And, she had Jimmy Rogers. So the one Jimmy Rogers record that I have, I've been playing the shit out of it since we watched that country music thing. And I got it from my friend's deceased mother's collection. And her name must have been Virginia because in her handwriting it says Ginny Silvera on the side of the record. And it just tickles me silly to think about this old black Jamaican woman sitting around in Central Florida listening to like the purest, most classical, the seed of that all the best of country music grew out of, this guy.
You could tell it was a very old record.
I know we wanted to talk about leftover from that last episode of things we didn't talk about on the country music episode was Hank Williams Jr., how terrible his mother was.
Well,
so she was married to Hank Williams, and they got divorced, and then they got married again, so they got divorced a second time, and then that's when he really went into the toilet.
Well, I think, not saying she's terrible, but she wanted to be a star, and since she couldn't do it on her own, she had married
Hank Williams
so that she could get a shot at singing with him.
And she was always trying to get into his show,
tried, but
and she didn't have half the talent that he did.
So he wanted her to sing with him, but the rest of the people, his band didn't want that, and nobody else wanted it, so he had...
Sponsors didn't want it.
So he had to tell her that, she couldn't sing with them. I don't think she liked it very much. Anyway, it ended up their life was downhill, and they got a divorce. So they were divorced, and she had this baby, and
Hank Williams Jr. And she made him perform since he was a kid.
Yes, he remembered all the songs of his father and played all the songs of his father from when he was 8. He was performing, and so he did that until he was 18, when he got his inheritance, and he was able to say, okay, that's it.
So he fired his mother as his manager, and she was making him do his father's songs, like he was a circus animal or something.
Well,
just
it wasn't
hiring him out to pimp the family name and everything.
well. She wanted to be famous, and so
Yeah, but she pimped out her own child, and he fired her once he was legally able to do it.
Yeah, it wasn't a very good thing. But then after he started to be on his own, he tried to record some of the stuff he wanted to do, and then people didn't want to hear it. They wanted to hear his father's songs. And then after that, he
had a terrible accident. He was in Montana and fell off of a mountain. I didn't know that. I always thought Hank Williams Jr. had his father was so skinny, and Hank Williams Jr.'s face is kind of puffy, that he fell down a mountain and had to have like 5 surgeries on his face. Like every bone in his face was broken. He had to be
it was more than that.
Reconstructive surgery. I didn't know that had happened to the guy.
I know, and I have such admiration for this man because he made music on his own. I mean, his own style. I knew all his father's songs, and I don't know all Hank Williams Jr.
All my rowdy
songs.
friends are coming over tonight. That's like the song of Monday Night Football.
Oh, okay. Well, but I'm going to try to find some of his songs and listen to them because I admire his spunk. And his voice was very nice. Very, very...
A nice voice.
Yeah, he has a nice voice.
So tell me, why do you drink? Why do you roll smoke?
Oh, goodness.
It's a family tradition. That's his other
okay.
other big hit. So another thing I wanted to talk about, we're drinking Coca-Colas. We bought those at the Target. That's why I brought up the friggin' Target.
Okay.
And during our quarantine 2 months, Coke is my favorite, but I've really just been like a sparkling water guy for the last few years because it's 0 calories, trying to keep out the sugar. But since my mom came, when you first came, I got the little bottles of Coke at Target, and then I bought some cans. And we want to complain to the Coca-Cola company people that the cans of Coca-Cola don't have half the bubbles that they used to. I remember as a kid pouring a can of Coke into like a glass of ice and like
seemed to last longer.
Oh my God, so many bubbles, and like you sip it and just your nose is
the bubbles don't
tickling.
seem to last as long. But I have tried to stop Cokes because I used to drink them all the time, and they aren't that good for you. And supposedly each Coke has like 8 tablespoons of sugar. I mean,
but it's summer and it's cold and it's
So
cheers. So we've determined that the very small bottles of Coca-Cola are the only way to drink this stuff.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
So yesterday I went to the bank, and it's really amazing that who would have thought that one day everybody at the bank would be wearing masks? I'm standing in line at the bank. And what a strange sensation to stand there and see, like, people are social distancing and everyone's quiet, and it's it seems like a much more serious affair doing anything now.
There's more plexiglass between people.
Plexiglass everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Somebody's selling a lot of plexiglass. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what'd you think at the bank?
I thought it was strange, and a person could come all the way up to a teller and point a gun or something. I mean, how do they know who's has a bad intention or what?
Well, another thing I was thinking about today, like after September 11th, there was a lot of Islamophobia, and then there was a lot of jokes, and then I heard a fair share of comedians doing jokes about Muslim women wearing like like the headscarves and their face coverings and shit. We're all Muslim women now because we're just showing our eyes.
Well, it's different.
It's
But you really need to keep your mask on as you're walking out there. It is kind of different.
Well, I for one love the masks because I'm tired of reading people's facial expressions. I'm kidding. It's a joke. Okay, so we have got so much to talk about. Today we are yodeling for the great museums. But before we do that, should we talk about the movie Flipped?
Oh, yes.
So we saw one movie this week, and we
was
both absolutely loved it. It's this
wonderful.
Rob Reiner film called Flipped.
Flipped. And it's the kind of movie you can take your child and your grandchildren to, and you can talk about things. You know, what makes a person, how you get a child to have integrity in their life and to stand up for what they believe. It's a wonderful movie. And so Tommy mentioned that it was done by
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Who did Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, The Bucket List, Wolf of Wall Street. This guy's done, and he was Meathead on All in the Family.
Well, you know, I think before I had said they're not making movies like they used to in Hollywood. But I tell you what, after this one, yes, they are. You just have to look for them, I guess. I recommended this movie.
You like this much better than Parasite.
Oh, God, there's no comparison. And I said, this movie should have had an award, and it really did have an award. It's the Truly Moving Motion Picture Award. Jeez, never heard of that, but it should have won an award. That was a really good movie.
So this kid it's in the 1950s or the early 1960s. This family moves to this neighborhood, and there's this little girl. It's this little boy. I don't know. He's like, 7, 8 years old. And then this little girl from across the street comes over, and she wants to help. And then him and the dad's kind of a dick and says, no, we don't need your help. And then the girl's got kind of a crappy yard, and you find out that in the course of the movie that her dad they're renting the house, and her dad has a mentally handicapped brother that he's putting the family money into keeping his brother in a nice place. So snobby asshole family across the street. Well, the dad makes comments about the yard, and the son tells the daughter, hurts her feelings. She's got chickens in the backyard. She brings them free eggs, and the dad says at dinner you might get salmonella, so they've been throwing away the eggs.
Yeah, and she catches the boy throwing away the eggs. But
and then she catches him in the library laughing at his buddy saying that her uncle is the R word, and that and he laughs at it.
Well, you don't want to give the whole.
We don't give away the whole movie, but it's an absolutely brilliant movie.
It's a wonderful movie. And so I said to Tommy, I wonder how many more movies this guy has done because I want to see them. And we pulled it up, and he's done a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of good stuff. The Bucket List, one of my favorite movies.
Good movie.
But anyway, we're really recommending this Flipped. It's a wonderful story.
Great movie. Watch Flipped. So it's also such a joy to get mail right now. Because we watched all these different art documentaries that I had, BBC art documentaries. So I ordered a bunch of, I went on Amazon and I looked up art documentaries, and I ordered a bunch of things. And it's like every day something's coming in the mail.
And they're really quick, too.
And we started watching, it was a PBS thing. I think maybe it's 10 years old, but it's PBS Great Museums is the name of this series, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. We haven't even gotten halfway through it, but it's kind of cool now that all the museums in the world are closed, and we're getting to go to these museums through this PBS documentary series.
It's mostly American museums, but some of them I hadn't even heard about, and for sure they'll be in my bucket list to look at sometime in the future.
We're going to get to that in a second. What's the last museum that you've been to?
Oh goodness.
You like that Tiffany Glass Museum in Winter Park, right?
In Orlando, that one is really, really good, and I go there at least twice or 3 times a year. It's a wonderful museum that has a great collection of Tiffany.
My girlfriend, who lives in Portland, last year when I was visiting her, we took a day trip down to Salem, Oregon, and we went to the Mental Health Museum. It's in a former insane asylum, I guess is what they used to call it, in Salem, Oregon, and it's actually where they filmed the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So that's kind of cool. I mean, it was disturbing, some of their exhibits and the treatment of these people, and some of the horrendous reasons people were sent there, who weren't even disturbed in any way.
Yeah.
Just might have enjoyed a few nefarious activities got thrown in there.
Was that the last museum you've been to?
Yeah, that's the last museum that I've been to. So, thinking about what a joy it is to just get things in the mail, packages coming, and I got a massive gift from my friend Jasper. He's a friend, fan, and supporter of Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp, and there's a lot of those. I guess pretty much anybody who gives to my podcast is I'm involved in your life. I'm your friend. So Jasper's been a great friend, and from reading my books, I highlight all of my books. When I read them, when there's an interesting passage or a wonderfully written line or something, I highlight my books. And the best highlighters in the world are from HEMA, which is kind of like the Target of Holland. And they do these brilliant highlighters, and the ink lasts forever. So my friend Jasper asked me if I needed anything from Holland when a few weeks ago, and I told him, please, if HEMA's open, can you send me some of these HEMA highlighters? So I just went to the post office today, and he sent me this massive box.
It's pretty big.
Doesn't this look familiar? These Dutch post office
they're big.
Boxes, because I mailed so many of these boxes to your house.
Yeah.
When I was living in Amsterdam, and just when I had to leave Amsterdam, or I was mailing things home, things I would buy in Europe, I assembled so many of these Dutch mailboxes.
And they were in my attic for a long time.
They were what?
In my attic.
In your attic, yeah.
Yes.
They were all in your attic forever. I didn't get them until I moved here 5 years ago.
Well,
I found all these boxes I sent
right.
10, 15 years ago. Amazing. So I know on YouTube it's kind of popular that there's these videos of people opening boxes. And, usually it's electronics or appliances and things, and it's kind of goofy, and I've never watched any of them. I just know that there's a thing on YouTube of people opening boxes. So I have not opened this wonderful big package from Jasper in the Netherlands, and I'm going to do it right now live on Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, shit. Wow. It is a Dutch party.
Oh, goodness. It is.
Holy shit, there's party hats.
Good grief.
Oh my God, stroop waffles.
Oh.
Yay, thank you, Jasper.
Oh, those are the ones that you put on your tea or coffee. Or
yeah,
tea.
Well, they're delicious any way you slice
really are
it.
Good.
Yeah, wow.
It's like a cookie that's got honey in the middle.
It's more like a thick syrupy type thing.
It's very good.
It's delicious.
You can buy them here now.
And this is room butter, speculoos, and butter almond sliced biscuits.
Wow.
Freshest boxer short. Gentleman's freshest boxer short. Look at that. That's so Dutch that
it's like a beer can.
It looks like a beer can or a soda can.
Yeah.
And there's underwear in there.
There's underwear. Oh,
ha ha. Well, one man sending another man underwear. That's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's really nice of him.
Ooh, sweet licorice.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
wow.
look, the big chocolate coins.
Oh, wow, that's really
wonderful.
Cool. They're about 4 inches across.
And there's some kind of Coca-Cola and heart-looking gummy bears.
Oh my goodness.
Ha ha ha.
Oh, that's
There's some
really
socks.
Cool.
It says winter socks.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh yeah, and there's a #1 trophy all over the socks. These are winter socks. That's hilarious. A HEMA cheese slicer.
Oh, goodness.
Wow, that's wonderful. Oh, these little they're like
cocktail peanuts?
puff-covered peanuts.
Wow, that's really different. I don't think I've ever seen one quite like that.
I don't know what these long things. I think those are
What are
candy of
those?
some kind.
Wow.
What is this? Wow. I don't know what that thing is.
Oh, I think you beat. It's like a beater, but I'm not
Like
sure.
an egg mixer?
I'm not sure how to use this.
Oh, nice. He sent me 2 things of bubbles.
Oh.
More socks. Oh, these look like these. These would be good for you, Mom. They're nice flower on it.
Thank you.
They're thank you
it says thank you
socks.
socks. That's so cute.
Wonderful. And he sent me 3 packs of the HEMA head highlighters.
Oh, goodness.
And a box of pens.
Wow, that's really cool.
Fine liners. Fine liners are the pens that I write my postcards to my golden Buddhas.
Oh, what's this? This is,
That's like a tie thing, like a necklace that goes on something. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jasper, in the Netherlands, for sending that package.
It's really cool. Thank you so much.
There's actually a letter from Jasper in this box, and it says, "Dear Tommy and Mrs. Rhodes, hope you're staying happy and healthy. To keep the party going, a few treats and doodads from Holland. Love, Jasper." Wow, that's so nice. I love the word. I love the word doodad.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, it's nice with all the party favors and candies,
it really is great.
and I'm so grateful for these HEMA highlighters, the greatest highlighters in the world.
Yes.
Anyway, Jasper, you're a beautiful human being, and thanks for sending me this
Thank you.
big, massive box full of love. And just seeing the Dutch post office box brings me joy. And long so for Lefa in the glory. Long may you live in the glory, my brother. Hip hip, hurrah! I will yodel for him. Yodel-a-hee-hoo, yodel-a-hee-hoo. And then also we got to mention that I got a wonderful email a few days ago from, oh my goodness, got to go to the phone.
You're not prepared.
All my gigs in July in Florida are not going to happen, by the way. David in Joliet, Illinois, sent a wonderful message that he really enjoyed the podcast with my mother, and he spent a couple hours pulling dandelions from his front yard.
Yes, and it reminded me of when you were a child and we lived in Indiana. It seemed like the dandelions would come in the yard from the sides. They were everywhere, which is funny because we don't have that many dandelions in Orlando or here. I hadn't seen that many. And you know that people can make dandelion wine. They did that in Indiana.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's legal, but I suppose that if you're just doing it for yourself, it would be okay.
Dandelion wine. Wow, that...
I've never tasted it.
Now imagine if he hears that and like he had like bushels of dandelions and he could have made jugs and jugs of wine and then he just
I'm not sure.
threw them away.
The process is probably pretty complicated, but I don't know.
David said he's a woodworking artist. Or I think that's something he's skilled at. I don't know if he makes a living at it. And I remember you telling me, was it our grandfather who was...
My grandfather on my mother's side, they were from Italy, and they did woodworking, like headboards and stuff like that. They would make roses.
Like roses on bed headboards.
Yes. And my great-grandfather, this was a story I got when I was in Argentina, because I was always trying to, find out about, the people that came before us. And nobody seemed to know too much. Like, I never did find out what city they came from. But, so I did find out that my great-great-grandfather was trying to pass on this skill to his son, my great-grandfather. And if he made a mistake, the great-great-grandfather would beat him up. I thought
if he didn't carve the rose
rose
woods
is quite
nice.
right. Yeah,
Wow.
I thought that's
He
terrible.
would get beaten if he didn't do it right.
Yeah, but
Wow.
maybe that's the way they did things in the old days.
Well, David, in Joliet, Illinois, if you're doing some woodworking and the next time you screw something up, just when you get pissed off at yourself, just remember, at least there's not a mean father to beat you for it.
Goodness. Well, I really appreciated your message to us, to my son, and I did get to read it.
And speaking of your, you grew up in Argentina, but like your ancestry, your mother's side came from Italy and your father's side came from Northern Ireland.
England, Ireland.
So let's talk about all these great museums that we've been watching. So far, the first episode was about the living museum of music that is the city of New Orleans. And so it showed all these musicians and different venues, and they talked about the history of New Orleans and, slaves and people from the Caribbean and Mexican people, French people, like all these, Creoles, just all the different influence of human beings that have come to New Orleans and made this city, such a vibrant place for music.
It was really interesting, and I had no idea when I went to New Orleans. Of course, I knew that jazz started there, but there was a whole history of jazz, and it was very well done. That documentary was very well done, though I can't remember everybody's name.
You don't need to remember everybody's name, and just any of the stories. Like they said that the guy also, one of the curator or people in the telling the story of the music life of New Orleans was saying also that the history of New Orleans has been very poor, and that music was like a great equalizer, like just one sound of a trumpet could cheer someone up and make them happy, or get people to start dancing.
And really, the jazz seemed to have had a real connection to funerals, because they showed how the people would precede the funeral.
The funeral procession.
Yeah, and they would.
They're following the dead body.
They would.
And the
have,
relatives are first. They're the first line.
Yeah, and they would be playing the music, and everybody be dancing and stuff.
And so then the people playing the music is the second line.
Well,
that's where they get that terminology in New Orleans.
They would go to the cemetery, and those cemeteries are kind of interesting because they're
above ground.
Above ground. I did see that. It was really different. So the family would stay there, and the music would go closer to downtown, I guess, and continue. And more people would join the music, and even people that didn't even know who had died. And it was...
Yeah, funerals were all a big party. You're walking down the street, and there's a funeral procession, so people would just follow along and dance because there was music happening.
That was kind of interesting. I never have seen that in real life, but it was interesting.
I thought it was cool. And at the end they were saying how they were talking about the musicians, and also I like they showed like Preservation Hall, which is this music venue, and I've been there a bunch of times, and I told you, oh Mom, I've been to that place many times.
Oh yeah.
It's cool, interesting too to watch this now with the tinted lenses of COVID-19. They're showing Mardi Gras and all these people at Mardi Gras, and right when all this started, a bunch of people had gotten sick at Mardi Gras. Yes. You can't help but think about that. But then also they're showing these packed nightclubs like Preservation Hall, and like it just makes me miss being in a sweaty club in New Orleans with people rubbing up against each other and dancing, and
it's kind of a dangerous place now. But I remember that they do have a Mardi Gras museum in New Orleans.
I've never been there.
I haven't either, but I did hear about it. And
I don't think that would be as exciting as actual Mardi Gras.
Yeah, well, I was there for Mardi Gras one time with a friend of mine whose family lived there, and it was really interesting how they did things. You know, looking at it from the inside, not like as a tourist or something. The guys would go out and pick a spot where the parades would come around, because the parades were all over town. So they would pick a spot, and they stayed there all night guarding their spot. And then the women would come with food and stuff, and they had like a special cake. The king's cake that had a little figure.
French people do that. Natalie used to make the king's cake every year. It's a French holiday, and they make a cake and they put a little crown in it, and whoever gets the it's a little crown the way that Natalie used to do it, because it's King's Day or something like that. And is why they make the cake.
And whoever got that in their piece of cake would have good luck the rest of the year. It was pretty interesting, and the floats were terrific. I mean, it was something to see.
It was cool. And then at the end of they were talking about like these charities and health insurance and medical assistance that these New Orleans musicians can get, and they encourage them to take care of themselves because they are valuable to the community. And the woman said, getting people to value themselves is the greatest challenge. So here's these beautiful, these musicians who make such beautiful music and make so many people happy, and just the heart and soul of New Orleans, and this organization really tries to encourage these musicians to take care of themselves and not be drunk all the time, or just eat a vegetable once in a while, you know?
Well, another thing that was very impressive to me was that these musicians are showing kids how to play. And they're having like after school things, to show them
to inspire future musicians.
And it looked like they were getting quite a few kids interested to keep them off the streets and stuff, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and that was where they said that music was like the great equalizer, because it gave these kids identity, and
they showed some kids that were 13 and 14 and how they played, and they gave them a chance to play out in public. It looked pretty good, like it's not going to stop anytime soon. Thank heavens,
Thank heavens. So the next one we saw, it was the Texan Museum in San Antonio, Texas. And apparently this was built for the World's Fair. They did a World's Fair in 1968 in San Antonio. The Hemisphere. Yeah. And now this one building is like the Texas Museum, and they just show all the different cultures. And they were saying that all these different cultures getting along is the genius of America. Mm-hmm. What makes America great is the fact that we're all these different religions and ethnicities and identities, and that we get along and everyone contributes.
Well, like Texas was made up of all these different people. It's not just when you think of Texans, it's not just a cowboy or an oil person. There's a lot of different kinds of people, but that's all over the country.
Well, I thought it was cool. They were talking about black Seminoles.
Oh,
and the Seminoles were the tribe of Florida, and I really take great pride in the Seminoles, because like they were one of the good stories of the Native Americans, because a lot of them could hide in the Everglades and not be found by the Union soldiers. They accepted runaway slaves into the Seminole tribe, and they were a meritocracy, so these slaves could rise to chiefdom. So, so a lot of runaway slaves had, melted into the Seminole tribe, and there were black Seminoles.
Yes, and they could track anybody. It seemed as though nobody could beat them at tracking others.
So when they were displaced, the Trail of Tears, when the American government made all of these Native Americans from the southern United States march to Oklahoma, and tons of them died. It was absolutely horrendous, the Trail of Tears.
Yeah,
So there was these black Seminole Native Americans in whatever you call them, Native Seminole, just black Seminoles, I guess. They were living in Oklahoma for 11 years, and a lot of them were put into military service, and they were the Buffalo Soldiers that Bob Marley sings about.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and then they got sick of living in Oklahoma, and after 11 years, a bunch of them went down to Texas.
Yes.
And so there was a woman at this Texas museum who was a black Seminole, and she's telling this story, and I know a lot about the Seminoles.
I know nothing about these.
The Seminole tribe owns every Hard Rock Cafe in the world. I think they sold like 10 of them, maybe the European Hard Rock Cafes a few years ago. But at one point, they owned every Hard Rock Cafe in the world. And they sponsored a stock car in NASCAR racing.
Huh.
Very smart investment people, the Seminoles. But that story was incredible.
It was
I had no idea.
Yeah, me neither.
Japanese rice farmers
That was
were brought
interesting.
over to East Texas in, I guess, the turn of the century, the 1900.
Yeah, who knew that? I didn't.
And they brought these wooden, what do you call
Beautiful wood thrashing machine.
Thrasher, that's the word.
Yeah. And they brought the way of doing things in Japan to do rice, to grow rice.
That's amazing. I got a friend named Jesse Dayton. He's a great, brilliant guitar player. He's from Beaumont, Texas, and just it's interesting. Like East Texas, to think of like a bunch of Japanese people living there,
Raising
growing rice,
Wow.
hand carving beautiful wooden rice thatchers. And it said that they were the first ones, the Japanese rice farmers were the first ones to buy gas-powered tractors.
Yes. Isn't
That
that
everybody else
interesting?
was afraid to buy a tractor. They didn't think it was
Yeah.
useful.
And to think that they were so advanced in a way, looking to new technology.
That was cool. And San Antonio, Texas is, I think, one of the undiscovered gems of America. It really great Mexican culture, and there's mariachi music everywhere, and wonderful Tex-Mex food and Mexican food.
I haven't been there, so.
I really, really love San Antonio. And it's odd that I've never been to that museum. So the next museum that we went to on this PBS series was the Charleston Museum
That was pretty interesting.
in Charleston,
too.
South Carolina. And they said that this is the first museum in America ever built in 1773. Then everything, and they had quite a eclectic collection, and then everything burned down in 1798. And everything they have in the collection is 1798 since then. And I've actually been to this museum. When I started out on the southern circuits, I was playing in Charleston, and I went. And when we put it in, I told you, I said, there's this massive whale skeleton in this museum.
Yeah, you said that.
And I couldn't believe it, because Charleston is way inland. And apparently a whale came up at one point all the way up the river or the harbor or the whatever it is, and died right there in Charleston. Or maybe people threw rocks at it and speared it or something, but that's how they got that massive.
Skeleton. Yeah,
they only dragged it from the river to the museum or to the main square. I guess they let it.
Oh goodness, I don't know.
I don't know. And then there was a great point. Remember, there was a Jamaican guy who was, I don't know if he was a curator or archaeologist or something. He was super smart, and he all these great facts, and he was talking about things coming from all over the world, like all the rice farming is where the wealth of Charleston came from, and they had these massive plantations, but it was like, the rice farming and the profits from that is what built all these mansions and everything, and the guy said that azaleas and gardenias are Asian plants.
Yes, how about
He said
that?
all these tourists come to Charleston and they think we're known for our azaleas and gardenias, and
They are known for
they
that.
associate all these beautiful flowers with Charleston,
But they're not native.
they're not native.
And that was kind of interesting. And to see all the plants that we're looking at in everybody's yards here, I'm sure that most of them, if not all, are foreign. I mean, from other places.
Yeah, definitely. God, so many. What was the? I don't want to look at my phone. There was so many exotic plant life.
There were so many exotic plants.
And you like that? You like that red bottle brush tree? That gets
Yes.
these. They look like almost like fuzzy
They
caterpillars.
look like
but they're
brushes. That's
Yeah,
what they look like.
they're
And,
red.
well, when I first got to Orlando, they were everywhere, and that was really different for me. I hadn't seen those before. And then, something must have happened to them. The next thing you know, you hardly see them anymore. Of course, there's been a lot of growth, but you hardly see them anymore.
And there's a lot of honeysuckle in this neighborhood. We
goodness.
walk by some of these houses and they have
They
like
just smell
a
wonderful.
whole fence,
Yes.
or there'll be a hedge of honeysuckle, and you'll
Yes.
just get this hit by this smell, and I love it. And
yeah.
growing up in Oviedo, Florida, when there used to be all these orange groves
Right.
everywhere, I remember like in spring when the orange blossoms would
Orange
be out.
blossoms, you could smell them, a mile away. But then the oranges, there were several freezes that happened. And I guess the orange grove owners got a lot of money for selling their land. And the next thing you know, there were housing developments on the orange groves,
Yeah.
which was a shame. And so you hardly ever, smell those wonderful smells of orange blossoms. And we used to have a lot of honeysuckles too, and I don't know whatever happened to that, because you hardly see them anymore. But that, I didn't even think of it until we walked around and saw so many in the neighborhoods here.
The next museum we went to was the Delta Blues Museum in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And this was great. I told you the story because you wore the Robert Johnson shirt. There's a famous story that Robert Johnson went to the Crossroads, which is supposed to be in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and that he sold his soul to the devil. Why does this devil always want your soul? I mean, why can't he just, take your car or your house or your wife or something? I'm kidding.
I'm not saying anything on that.
So that's this mythological story, but that is where John Lee Hooker is from, and B.B. King is from Indianola, Mississippi, not far from there. I really like that. I've never been to that museum, and they had Morgan Freeman was on there talking about
Oh, yes.
the museum. What was the? Do you have any?
Gosh, I can't hardly remember.
Said you
too
can hear
much
a
about it.
human heart through a stethoscope, but you can hear it better through music.
Well,
That's what the
an
guy
interesting
said.
thought, yeah.
Oh, here's something that popped up. That this is in my notes, but it's not one of the museum things. But here's a tip for you: the public library, the New York Public Library, on Spotify, has sounds of New York City.
Oh.
Because New York City is so quiet right now. So you can go on, and I think it's just go on the New York Public Library, and there's sounds of traffic and construction, street musician, just all these noises of New York. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, in case you missed it while you're trying to sleep.
Because New York's so quiet now. I remember after I lived in New York, I would have to get someone to lean on a car horn before I could fall asleep. It's such a noisy place usually. So after the Delta Blues Museum, we went to the Baseball Hall of Fame
Yeah.
in Cooperstown, New York. And
And I remember going there with your father and you guys when you were little.
I was a little kid.
Yeah, but we went way out of our way. It seemed like we drove and drove and drove, and it was not on the main highways somehow.
It's a small town, and it's way upstate New York. It's really hard to get to. I vaguely remember going there as a kid.
I vaguely remember it.
I
Myself.
went in 1986. A friend of mine and I drove up there from New York City, and it did take forever. And I've got the ticket stub I showed you.
Yes.
I found not too long ago, and it cost $5 to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1986. And boy, that made me feel like an old man. Nothing costs $5 anymore. But the Baseball Hall of Fame opened in 1939, and that is the year you were born.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
they had a lot of famous names. I remember the names, but of course I don't remember all the statistics and stuff. Although it seemed like everybody I knew that knew all about the statistics, and that was interesting. But all the stories and the people, it was. They had a lot to say about that.
It was cool. I'd really love to go back there. I love baseball, and I miss it now because it's summer, and I had really planned on seeing a couple games at Dodger Stadium every year, like I always do.
One thing that I remembered was how the first people that played baseball, their gloves and their helmet things were not... there was hardly, they were not very protective. And I don't know how those people caught these balls with those gloves. They were sometimes, some of them were like half gloves.
Yeah, they were really tiny.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how the game has developed as far as safety for the players. I think it's way better now.
Yeah, and so in the 1880s or 1890s, Spalding, the guy Spalding of the Spalding Sporting Goods store, loved baseball, and he wanted it to become a world game. So he paid for this exhibition tour all over the world, and they went to Egypt, and they played a game of baseball at the pyramids.
Yes.
And they had this picture. God, you got to see this picture. It's all these old-timey baseball players in their baseball uniforms.
And they're all over this.
And they're all on the Sphinx.
Yeah.
They're all like standing on the Sphinx in their baseball uniforms. And it's like 1890 or something.
It's pretty cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. Lou Gehrig. I didn't realize his speech when he got Lou Gehrig's disease. But, lucky to get a disease named after you. That was in October 1939. That famous speech, and it's echoing, and he says, "Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth."
Wow, he was somebody you could really look up to.
Yeah. He said, "I may have been given a bum break, but I sure do have a lot to live for."
Wow, that's really terrific.
Such a heartbreaking moment.
Yeah.
And he loved his mother. His mother lived with him. He took care of her. Baseball was going to stop in World War II. When World War II broke out, because all the men were joining up to fight, and President Roosevelt wrote Major League Baseball. They had the letter and said that America needs baseball. So that's why they played during World War II. And a lot of the best players, I know Ted Williams was a fighter pilot, and a lot of the stars went and fought.
Yeah, they said that. And so maybe that's when the women started playing ball.
Well, they were saying that the women started playing in the 1880s and 1890s, and they had these exhibitions. Mm-hmm. They would go around and they would play. What were
anybody who would play them?
They would play. They played men's teams. They played women's teams.
Yes. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And there's a movie,
Young Lady Baseball. That's what the the posters would say. And they traveled the country, and then in the 1950s, these women's teams, this bra company, the Maiden Form Bra, had this advertisement of this woman. She's playing baseball
with the Maiden Form
Bra, and she says, "I dreamed I pitched the World Series in my Maiden Form Bra."
Yeah, they were supposed to be, like ladies, and they had a movie made of them, A Team of Her Own. I'd like to see that, but I did not see it.
Yeah, I was telling you, it's a great film, and Tom Hanks says, "There's no crying in baseball."
I
'Cause the
really
girl
would
says-
like to see it.
All right, we'll watch that one.
Okay.
The first pro all-black team was the Cuban Giants of Babylon, New York, in 1885, and Ted Williams, when he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, he called for the acceptance of black players into Major League Baseball, and he said one day, hopefully these great players, black players, would be recognized by the Baseball Hall of Fame. I love Ted Williams. I think that's one of the coolest things he ever did in his life.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And there was a player
After
who...
having his head frozen. Did you know he had his head frozen?
Oh, no, I didn't.
The Cairo, I don't know what it's called.
Well, that's not going to help.
So if they ever can bring people back to life, Ted Williams' head's going to be there. So, to talk to.
Thanks.
Hey, Ted, that was great, that acceptance speech you gave.
Good grief.
Cool Papa Bell. I have a baseball card, a recreation. I always loved his name. That's Cool Papa Bell. He's the one they said could turn out the lights and be under the covers before it got dark.
And they said that was true. It was kind of interesting.
And then Muhammad Ali said that years later, but it was apparently...
He must have been really fast.
He must have been. To be under the covers before dark? Yodelay-hee-hoo, yodelay. Josh Gibson, the Black Babe Ruth, died of a stroke at 35, just before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier.
Yeah.
Damn it. That's terrible. Because Josh Gibson just missed when everything changed, and he was apparently one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. Roberto Clemente, another player I love, his plane went down in Nicaragua. There had been an earthquake, and he was bringing supplies.
Yeah.
And they said the reason he was bringing it himself was because the criminals in Nicaragua wouldn't steal from him.
Wow.
That's why he went there to deliver it himself.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
I know.
Showed the Dodgers and the Yankees moving to California, and that ripped the heart out of Brooklyn.
Gosh. Yeah.
Tommy Lasorda called Dodger Stadium Blue Heaven on Earth. Hank Aaron's 1974 home run. Anyway, the female teams.
And they had all these balls with the players' names written on them.
Oh, yeah, in Brooklyn in the 1880s, 1890s, each game they would paint the ball and
Gold.
put it was black with gold lettering.
Yeah, it was.
And they'd put
the
the names of the teams and the score and like maybe a little message of who did what on the ball.
I think that museum is probably something most people should look at if you're at all interested in baseball.
Yeah. It's hard to get to.
Even
I mean,
if
and
it
I'm
is
sure you could probably
another
look at a
way.
lot of the stuff online.
Well,
I'm sure they have a website or something. People could probably look at the artifacts. It's not
Yeah.
like going, of course, but
Right.
who knows how long.
It's a lot better to go on your own, and you can see it and take your time and walk around and really read the plaques and everything. So,
Here's something that blew me away. There's several reasons I love going to Major League Baseball. Getting to yell at millionaires. Hey, you bum, you creep, you dropped the ball. These are millionaires on the field. And, how often do you get to yell at millionaires?
I never think of that.
Another reason I like to go to baseball games, professional baseball, is it's one of the few places you're allowed to throw trash on the floor. You can throw the trash on the floor and they sweep it up after the games.
It's like that peanut restaurant where you throw the peanuts on the floor.
And that's what people do at baseball games. They sit there and eat peanuts and throw it on the floor. I love it.
Well, they had that song, Take Me Out to
And
the
so
Ball Game.
the main reason I love to go to the baseball is the seventh inning stretch when everybody sings "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I think it's such a happy moment. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back, 'cause it's root for the Dodgers. If they don't win, it's a shame, 'cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. I love it. So the guy who wrote that song in 1908, Jack Norwood, the guy who wrote that song never attended a Major League Baseball game in his life.
Yeah, isn't that the wildest
That
thing
blows
ever?
my mind.
I know.
I don't care if I never go back.
Yeah.
How could you write that if you weren't there living
don't know.
it?
Yeah.
He was inspired by a newspaper ad for the Polo Grounds, which is where the Giants played baseball in Brooklyn. While he rode the New York subway, he saw a newspaper and the ad for the Polo Grounds, and he wrote that song.
Well, it's
He wrote it on the New York subway in 1908.
It's almost like he had been there and was happy to be there.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah, and he wasn't.
I miss standing in a crowd, a stadium full of people, singing that song. One day. And what a happy day that will be.
And you have to have a hot dog.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at Dodger Stadium, I think you can get kimchi on your hot dog. I'm kidding.
Well,
They do sell, like, soju, which is this, like, Korean, like, sake.
oh, really?
And they also sell this Korean. They have a lot of Korean fans at Dodger Stadium.
Huh.
Dodger Stadium, I really love Dodger Stadium, even though it's a very old stadium. The next museum we went to was the Ellis Island Immigration Museum.
Oh, that was interesting.
And, you know, you're an immigrant yourself, Mom. But
Yeah.
how'd you feel watching the story of Ellis Island and all these immigrants coming here?
Well, I didn't come through Ellis Island. It was a little before me. It was really interesting. All these people had a story to say. And they had recorded everything that they had with them, even how much money they had or if they hardly had any money. And that was, you know, people came with just the clothes on their back, and we came with just the clothes on our back.
I remember you said you came in January
January.
1950.
Yes, we had been.
And you guys didn't have proper coats, right?
No, and the thing was that even though I'm from Argentina, we were living in Peru, Lima, Peru, and so I never had a coat before that, and my mother had a lady make me a coat. It was a really light blue coat with it was actually it was like a spring coat. We had no idea, you know, how cold it was, and I remember getting off the plane and I couldn't breathe. It was
Freezing.
so cold,
Wow.
so cold, and you know, Lima is high in the mountains. I mean, it's high. The altitude is high. So it's not in the mountains. It's by the ocean, and then the mountains are on one side. But I couldn't breathe. It took a while for me to feel like I was walking on ground. I was so cold, and that's what we had. We were not prepared for the coldness of Washington, D.C., January. And it was so strange because, you know, when I went to school, there weren't that many foreign people in Southeast Washington, D.C. at that time. It was like a little town within a town. Everybody knew everybody. There might have been
Anacostia,
a handful of
Washington,
foreign
D.C.
people
Wow.
in that in school. So they don't know where to put me, and I think it was before Anacostia High School. I went to the junior high school, and it was really different because I couldn't really speak English, and at a time when I was almost a teenager and wanted to fit in, it was sort of traumatic.
You told me you and your brother learned English by going to the movies
Yes, well,
and watching TV and stuff, right?
one time we went to the movies, and it was a musical. New York, New York. I don't know if anybody remembers it. It was a musical, and we liked it. we were sitting there, mesmerized, even though we didn't know what they were saying. The songs were cool. And we were, waiting for the thing to finish. And it started again, so we just stayed again.
Hilarious. Two little Spanish-speaking kids
the
sitting
only
in the
foreign
theater.
ones.
What are we going to do? And it starts again. We'll just stay.
We'll stay, yeah. So we watched it again, and, we liked it, even though we didn't know what they were saying. And my parents had called the police. So we got back without knowing that they were looking for us. That was interesting. But, you guys
got in trouble, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You got into a lot of trouble because you disappeared.
Well,
that's a very important part of the story you might want to tell there. Oh, yeah, we just hung out in the movies all afternoon. Your parents were flipped out. They didn't know where you were.
And they called the police, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we, couldn't speak English, and here we were. So, but, in those days, it was different than it is now. There weren't that many foreign people where we were. And the law was when, like, my father got to be an American citizen, before he got to be a citizen, we all had to have these green cards. And every January, we would go to the post office and register. So you registered that you were living there, your address and all that. And then when you got to be a citizen, you didn't have to do that anymore. But when my father became a citizen, anybody 16 and under was an automatic citizen. 18 and over, you could get your own papers. I was 17, so 17 was nothing, a whole year of nothing. And so my father had gone to an Americanization school across town, and that's when your father started driving us around, because there was a bus
So your dad bought a car, but he didn't have a driver's license.
Right, he didn't.
And he asked my father,
Yeah.
who was a teenager with a driver's license,
Right, to drive us
him
around.
around and drive him to work.
So he would drive my brother and I and your father. We would take my father to the Americanization school, and we hang out until my father finished the Americanization school, and then we'd come back, his classes. So I went there when I was 17. So
what did they teach at the Americanization school?
All about the
hey,
government.
Hey, Jagoff!
No.
Hey, what's wrong with you?
No, it was all about
play ball.
American government. And
Cool.
So when I took government in high school, I didn't even have to think about it. I got an A because I knew all about it. And it was a really pretty deep class. And the test for becoming an American citizen was very hard. It was pretty complicated. And when you got to be a citizen, you'd go to a courtroom in Washington, D.C., and they would call your name out, and you would throw in your green card. You never needed that green card anymore, and you could change your name. And, when I got there and they said you could change your name, and from now on you could be whatever, there were a lot of people changing their names. And I thought, geez, it'd be cool. I could maybe choose a different name. But I figured, I had to go home, and my father would probably not like that idea. Although, what a cool thing to do, to change.
To be able to change your name.
To whatever you wanted.
Wow.
Yeah, so that from then on you would be whatever you wanted. But I didn't do it. And it's okay, I shouldn't have done it anyway. That was kind of silly.
Your father probably would have been too pissed off at you.
Oh, he would. That's true.
So they were saying that 1/3 of the people who came to Ellis Island stayed in the New York area, and they worked their asses off, and that all of these immigrants from all these different places assimilated. And you said,
yes.
And you said, that's right. That's what we did.
That's what we did.
Assimilate.
Assimilate.
Become American as quick as you can.
Yeah, and I stopped speaking
Spitting,
Spanish.
grabbing your crotch.
No.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, you had to become, be part of the tapestry of this country. And so I stopped speaking my language and didn't do it for like 40 years. I really assimilated.
Well, you talked to your cousin. You would call her once in a while. I remember as a kid, I thought, wow, my mom is a really talented, special, some unique human. She speaks this other language. I remember you'd be in the kitchen speaking Spanish, and I knew there was this relative in Argentina you were talking to. So for me as an American kid, wherever we were living, I always thought that was really cool. Oh my God, my mom
I didn't know
has
you
this,
guys
has
thought
this
it was
superpower.
Cool.
She can talk Spanish.
Well,
I was very, very impressed by that. I thought that was really cool.
But it wasn't until much later that I found out that, immigrants that came didn't really teach their children the language. But then their children would want to know about it.
You don't think the immigrants who have come to America have
I didn't teach you guys.
Oh, you mean taught their language, like you not teaching me Spanish?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant they didn't learn English.
No. You were absolutely.
No, I was totally
English.
cheated by not speaking Spanish.
Well, I had no idea. But you guys picked up a few words afterwards.
Okay, well, we got to keep moving. We got some more museums.
Okay.
They were saying on that Ellis Island Museum thing that every denomination of all these different people, from Jews and Catholics and all these different people, got so emotional.
Yes.
So leaving Ellis Island, I guess you passed the Statue of Liberty. When they all saw the Statue of Liberty, they'd be crying, and Jews were in prayer shawls, and people on their knees praying as the boat passed the Statue of Liberty. And
I saw the Statue of Liberty, but I never saw that museum. And what a cool place! I think if you live anywhere near there, you should go see it.
Did your family have a moment like that where you guys just got all emotional, like, we're finally here, we've arrived?
It was a long...
And you're in Washington, D.C., so you're seeing all the great monuments.
It was a long... it was years before we got here. I mean, they investigated my great-grandfather and how he voted and stuff. You couldn't just come here, It was a complicated thing.
Okay, so the next museum we went to is the Museum of the American Indian, and that's what it's called. I thought we called them Native Americans now, but when I lived in New York City in the Wall Street area, this museum is right there. It's in the former Customs House. Apparently, so there's also a Native. And they call it the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian is what it's called, officially. There's one in D.C. There's one in Suitland, Maryland. That's more of a warehouse. But I used to do drugs and climb on the statues in front of this place when I lived down there. No one lived down in Wall Street, but I loved going into this museum.
Good thing I didn't know about it.
Yeah, and I'd rollerblade down in this lower Manhattan. It was so cool, and that's before September 11th when I lived there, 1998 to 2000. But I've been into that museum like 5 or 6 times. It's a really cool museum, and it's right in the heart of Wall Street.
I remember you talking to me about it, and the cool part that I thought was so interesting was that Indians thought that inanimate objects had a soul also, like rocks, rivers, and other things, and that that was really something, a new thought for me to understand that. But and that was really interesting, and how if you were making a basket or something, that would have like part of you would be in this basket, and they had all this art that they would do, with things that around them. They would make these blankets, beautiful stuff, and it would be like part of
They didn't talk about it on the documentary, but it was at that museum that I learned. They said that whenever I don't know who whose authority said this, but it was I think a Native American person there or something in a display or an exhibit that said that when Native Americans made a piece of art like a basket or a blanket, they would always intentionally leave a mistake. And they called that intentional mistake the God point because they believed that God entered through the mistake.
Huh. Well, Pennsylvania Dutch people, they're so into making quilts, they make sure that there's a mistake on the quilt when they're doing it by hand because only God makes perfect things.
Ah, ha, ha. Similar
idea.
I like they said that these Native Americans, they believed that if they approached when they were hunting, I forget which tribe they were talking about, or whoever, but they were saying that the Native American people, when they approached an animal when they were hunting, if they approached the animal with love and respect, the animal would give themselves to them. I thought that was really interesting.
That was interesting. And
then they honored the animal by making useful pieces out of every part of their body.
Yeah, and that idea, I first heard about that more or less, was with the Last of the Mohegans. I think that's where I saw it before, where the guy thanked the deer that he was giving up his life to help him. So I kind of understood that was an Indian idea. But it was really interesting to note that there's at least 500 different languages that all these Indians had. It wasn't just one group of people. They were quite diverse, and they had their own traditions and stuff. And one thing so this museum, one thing that they did was these pipes that they smoked, like you see that in the movies all the time, smoking the peace pipe. Well, the museum doesn't put the pipes together because somehow, if they're together, it has something to do with the spirit world. So they show the pipes separate. And they also had moccasins, all these different moccasins.
Yeah, 2,000 pairs of moccasins.
Wow,
in that
just
New York
beautiful,
place.
beautiful.
I thought it was interesting. They said that the word art does not appear in any Native American language.
Isn't that
because,
interesting?
And to them, all objects should be or has to be useful.
Yes.
It wasn't, as nomadic peoples.
Yeah, they weren't. They talked about, the Indians in Alaska and Eskimos, and what beautiful coats that they would wear, and everything was done with art, and also to pass it on to their children. And one of the problems that the Indians were having now, is to pass on their culture, because like if your culture is to go out and shoot a buffalo or something, the young people now are. That's not,
all the buffalo have been killed, and all the property's been sold and fenced off. So, you can't migrate with herds anymore.
Yeah, so it's a whole different way of living, and it's a different problem. But how important the children were, and how they tried to do little miniature things for the children to play with, so that they would get the idea of how to live as an Indian. It was really interesting.
It was interesting. I like the woman said, a basket is a song made visible.
Yeah, I thought the whole thing was interesting.
And then the curator said the way he was talking about the traditions and the way of life in Native American tribes, that the way you learn is by listening, by simply being with people, by watching people, seeing what they do, observing.
Yeah,
that's how
you learn.
People learn.
Right.
The next museum we went to was the National D-Day Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I've never been there, and I'd really love to go. A lot of people call it the World War II Museum, but it's the D-Day Museum from the World War II Allied invasion of Europe when the Nazis had France and everything. And the reason it's in New Orleans is because this guy, Andrew Jackson Higgins, he had the biggest defense contractor business in New Orleans. He had 30,000 employees, and he's the guy that made all of the small landing craft. The Nazis had put all of these machine gun turrets up and down the coast from Holland and Belgium all around France, and they were expecting an invasion. They had these like 5 or 50 ton, it looked like jacks, and all these barbed wire and all this. There was just so many layers to get through for an invasion on the beaches of Normandy, and there was landmines everywhere. And then the Nazis had these poles with landmines on the top. There's just landmines everywhere. And so large ships couldn't get in, and it was Higgins Industries that manufactured these small boats. They could hold 36 soldiers at a time, standing with their backpacks and their gun. Must have been shitting in their pants. All these little, they said, what was it, 3,000? I have to look that up. 3,393 Americans died. Maybe that's Omaha Beach, but that's a lot of human beings.
Yeah, well, they show that in movies a lot, but it was horrible. And one thing that was interesting to me was that it was the first time they used paratroopers. That was a new thing for World War II. And so your brother John was a paratrooper. And they had the 82nd and 101st Airborne Division. And I'll tell you the story, although you've
I went
heard
to
it.
John's paratrooper school graduation in
Yes.
Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And that's also where Geronimo was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That's where Geronimo died. Coming home drunk from a bar, he rode his horse, and he fell into a ditch, and he got pneumonia and died.
Gosh, that was awful.
That's what Fort Sill is famous for.
Okay,
But I
well,
saw John jump out of a plane and get his graduation thing.
well, must have been another graduation thing that I'm not keeping wonderful track of. At graduation, he had called me and said, "Ma, you want to come to my graduation from jump school?" I guess it was a graduation from jump school. So I said, "Sure." And Laura and I went, and we got there kind of late, and we didn't sleep a long time because you had to be up on this hill at 5. Like, we had to get up at 5 to be up on this hill, and watch them jump. Well, I don't know where my brain was. I didn't put 2 and 2 together that they were going to jump, you know. And here we are up on this hill with all these people, you know, the families. And a plane came and would drop off a bunch of paratroopers, and then another plane would come and drop off some more paratroopers, and like rotating every time a plane came, and they'd drop all these guys. And actually now women, not only, and on the documentary, the woman, when she mentioned about the paratroopers, said that that young men were jumping. She didn't say jumping, she was hurling themselves out of airplanes. And I think I was in total shock. I was standing there and they jumped. You know, you could see these people all over. And they would not, some of them, it was a hard hit on the ground. And then they would fold their parachute, put it back on their backs, run up this hill, men and women, and they would scream, "Airborne, airborne." So they all stood there screaming, "Airborne, airborne." And somebody said, "Oh, now the mothers can put the wings on their sons. Well, I just, I'm standing there going, oh my God, my whole life I try to keep my children from getting hurt. And here I have my son jumping off, hurling himself off an airplane. It was like, oh my God. And so Laura run and pinned his wings, and his girlfriend, both of them ran over there to pin his wings. And I'm just standing there going, oh my God. I was not prepared. Don't ask me why I wasn't prepared. I was not prepared. But now, if they did that nowadays, it wasn't just young men jumping off, hurling themselves off the airplanes. It's young men and women hurling themselves off airplanes.
And they said most of the paratroopers in World War II didn't make it. Most of them got killed.
Yeah. And Johnny was in Iraq and Afghanistan. I just wanted to mention that.
Notice how I keep moving on the topic of my brother. They said that the National D-Day Museum is the story of how America saved the world for democracy. There were other countries involved, but it's really inspiring. I really want to go to this museum. And they said that during World War II, they were saying that after Pearl Harbor happened on a Sunday, and on Monday there was like a line 4 deep to get into the recruiting offices. Everybody signed up. Right. Everybody in America stood up. They wanted to fight. They said, this is enough. They wanted to strike back. Everybody was so pissed off. And no, that's it. The guy said that during World War II that there was all these home front slogans, and that everybody would say, we're all in this together.
Yes.
Which is what you hear now all the time for the COVID thing.
Right.
Which is, and then with the still political division that's happening in this country, it's a pity that people are not united right now, because this is such a unique moment in history, like World War II. They said people planted victory gardens.
Yes.
And copper was rare, so pennies were made out of steel.
And the people's houses would put out stars on their windows. And like they showed a blue star on a white background. And that showed how many people in your family were fighting. And if they put out a gold star,
that means they're dead.
They're dead.
Yeah.
They died in battle. Wow. And they mobilized every resource.
Yeah, and that was a proud thing, that if you were in a Gold Star family, that your child had died for their service to the country.
Yeah. They did war bonds. They saved gasoline, and everybody. It was like a really uniting thing. Everybody was involved, and that's when the women went out to work on factories and stuff.
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah. So
it's really an inspiring time in human history. I mean, it was so terrible. Like just the genocide against the Jewish people, and just just the heinous shit that the Nazis were doing, and fascism, and thinking that their particular strand of the white race was the dominant race that should dominate the earth is a pretty terrifying thought. And I think the fascism that's happening now is a complete reflection of what was happening then. You think moments in history can never repeat themselves, but I think it's great that America and the Allies stood up to the bullies. Oh my God, that was the nicest thing. Where's that letter that the guy wrote from Iwo Jima?
Yeah.
He wasn't Leonard Smith Isaacs Jr. He had 2 sons. He's in Iwo Jima. All those Pacific islands, like Iwo Jima was like one of the bloodiest battles, and the Japanese were vicious fighters for those Pacific islands. So this guy writes he's not going to be home at Christmas, and he writes his 2 sons a letter a week before Christmas. He tells them that Japan is like a bully, And I hope you boys will never be bullies when you grow up. I want you to always I want you to always help the smaller fellow. And above all, I want you boys never to be afraid to fight for what is right. And if you and other boys do this, then maybe one day all daddies will be home for Christmas instead of out fighting wars.
And the guy died.
And then he died in the battle.
Yeah.
And that letter was the only thing, one of the few things that these sons had growing up, these words to guide their life by. And what beautiful words.
Yes.
That, bullies should be stood up to, and you should always, look out for the smaller person and stand up for injustices. So, any other thoughts on the...
No, I'm sorry I didn't get to see that museum. But,
And they said they wanted to show that, war unfortunately involves human beings killing each other. And then on the third floor, when you're leaving the museum, there's this massive photo of the American cemetery at Omaha Beach to show them the massive amount of people.
and mostly the museum was to show people how terrible war really is. And I thought that was a really good thing to show people.
Yeah, I agree. And the guy said how America acted as a whole together, how the whole country rose up on their hind legs on December 8th, the day after Pearl Harbor, and said, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I like that we're exercising our curiosity. The selection of museums are great. Like I said, that all the museums are closed, and we're getting to have museum experience right now by watching these things. So the next great museum, the last one we're going to talk about today, is the Library of Congress. And I've actually, you said you've been there?
I've been there, but I didn't really look everywhere. I did see one or two things, but when you hear all the stuff that's in there, it's like amazing. They had 500 miles of shelves and 126 million items, and they have some really interesting stuff. But a couple of the things that I thought were really terrific was that, when the country first became a country, and then the British came and they burned Washington, actually, and they burned the first Library of Congress. And then Jefferson donated all his books. So that's it started. The Library of Congress started with Jefferson's.
This was the one where the British.
It was in.
I had the. It's funny. I lost the notes.
1814. Thomas Jefferson gave his collection of books, and there's a draft.
It was Thomas Jefferson's personal library. Is the library that the Library of Congress was built around after the British occupied and burned Washington to the ground in 1814.
Isn't that interesting? And there's a draft of the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson wrote.
Well, this is what I liked. It's the first draft of the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
So they show that he's crossed things out. And he's made little notes in the margins.
Other people added to it and made
Other
changes.
people added to it that the Declaration of Independence wasn't just handed down like the Ten Commandments to Moses. That like Thomas Jefferson really worked on it. He thought about the wording. Different people added things to it. But the first draft is Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
Other people added a few notes here and there. But the main body and the whole first Jefferson is Thomas Jefferson's words and thoughts. I thought that was cool. They have the first draft of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation speech from 1862.
And they have the diaries of George Washington, which was interesting. And they have the Gettysburg Address also. Yeah,
and they said that those were actually probably the actual papers that Lincoln was holding at Gettysburg when he gave the address. That's pretty cool. And they had the contents of Lincoln's pockets from the night he's killed.
In
I just want to
1860.
stop for a second and say how beautiful the building is, the Library of Congress. And I've actually been there
beautiful.
because it's one of the most beautiful buildings in America. And you walk in, and there's these beautiful columns and archways and marble staircases, and up the stairs is this tile mosaic of the goddess Minerva, the goddess of knowledge. And I have a fan / friend who works at the Library of Congress. And when I was there about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that, this guy would come to see me whenever I played in Washington, D.C., and he said, he emailed me and invited me for a private tour. And he's in charge of like the photo and online content of the Library of Congress. And this is one of the most important things that you're going to learn today that I want you to know, that the entire contents of the Library of Congress, well, I mean, not the entire content, but like most of it is available online. It's all free. You can access the Library of Congress. You can look anything up, see these documents that we're talking about, just all kinds of different things from American history.
Best part.
So when I was there about 10 years ago, this guy who works there gave me and Ashna a private tour of the Library of Congress. And that was such a cool experience. But separately, around the same time, there's a guy that works for the Library of Congress for their audio archive who contacted me, and he wanted my albums to digitize and put in the audio archive of the Library of Congress. So at the time, I'd only made 2 albums. I had done Hot Sweet Ass and Live in Paris.
I think that's an honor.
I mailed this guy my 2 CDs. So my first 2 albums are in the Library of Congress audio archive.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
Pretty cool, huh?
It's an honor, Tommy.
If that doesn't impress the ladies, nothing will. I'm kidding. No, it's truly an honor, of course.
Yes.
And I'm too wimpy to go fight in a war, so at least I'm in the Library of Congress.
Well, there were so many interesting things that are collected there. You know that Jefferson had Lewis and Clark make maps as they were going out west. And so they have all the maps that
so they had the maps that they traveled with, and that Lewis and Clark would actually write notes on it.
Yes.
Of what the things they would see, mountain ranges and trees and rivers and stuff. So the maps hadn't fully been detailed, but they were a loose idea of where they were going. So and they still have the creases in them and the handwritten notes that each of them
and they have a 5 million map collection, if you can believe that. And maybe Lewis and Clark's were the first ones. And they also have Martin Luther King Jr.'s his speech.
I Have a Dream speech.
Yes. And, all this is really important stuff.
I have a dream, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will rise up and in the great Negro spirituals join hands together and say, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty. I'm free at last.
Yes,
so they have Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech at the Library of Congress.
They also had Alexander Graham Bell's gramophone, and they showed how they had tin cylinders and then wax discs, which was really interesting.
Well, and the guy that changed everything, Emil Berliner, molded the discs that became the first vinyl records. So Emil Berliner is my hero, because then vinyl records started being made. They have George Gershwin's piano.
They got Roosevelt's fireside chats during the war.
All on their audio. I wonder if that's something that could be accessed now online through their audio archive. Was the Roosevelt's fireside chats?
Well, they said you could look at everything through the internet. They have
well, this is what you can listen to it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can listen to these, and they said that people felt like the president was talking directly to them.
Yeah.
People are worried. There's war.
Well,
You
it's the first time the president, would keep them updated every week, which was really pretty good. They have a whole bunch of comic books.
They have the first comic books. They're the Library of Congress is the great protector of American humor, they said. They have Bob Hope's joke file. They've got his show scripts, TV shows. That's probably why they reached out to me in the first place, was the fact that they're so active in preserving what is American humor.
And I think that's really great. And
my friend Jack Bulwer told me once that I was the quintessential voice of American humor.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Well, I just think that that's a really cool thing we can do now. Look at all these wonderful things that are so American, our society.
Well, they also said that the Library of Congress is a repository of world treasures of all these different, the what was it? God, where's that note? That the Stalin, when he came to power, when he was erasing Russia's history, he put 2,000 glass color prints for sale in the Library. Congress bought them. It was the Tsar's personal photographer. So all of this documentation of the life of the Russian Tsars before the Russian Revolution would have been lost otherwise. And remember, there was the Lithuanian woman who was explaining these old children's folk tales from Lithuania that were there. It's not just America. It's kind of world culture that's preserved there.
There's some stuff from Ethiopia also, books, children's books like. And there's so much. There's just so much. You just have to look at it yourself.
Well, and it's really cool, and I think that's a really great thing to know now and forever.
Yes.
That the Library of Congress, you can go online and access all of it. They said the Library of Congress embraces its role on the internet as the ultimate museum. So they're trying to be the ultimate museum of the internet, and you can look up anything and probably hear audio archives of television shows.
Yes.
Not television, radio shows, television shows, just old speeches. I'm sure there's so much great stuff on there, and even like comedians.
I guess if you live nearby, you can go there with a library card and take out stuff.
Yeah, they said you just need an ID if you go there. But they said that their main objective is they want people to be inspired. They are inspired by the creativity of human beings, and that they wanted the Library of Congress to be for people to build a country, the country of America, for us to have the capacity for self-correction when our country goes the wrong way, and further creativity of the future. They want people to be creative in the future and be inspired, and for America to remember its soul and not get off track of what our personal mission statement is in the world.
I do think that Americans are the most creative people, and maybe it's because we're so versatile. So many different people came here, and we're open to new ideas.
Yeah, well,
and freedom is a thing we really need to be able to keep and generate for all the people that died. That they didn't die for nothing. And that's not a good key to end this on.
So
I'm sorry.
I thought what I was saying before about the Library of Congress wanting to inspire human beings to be creativity for the future, and to remind America when it gets off track what the soul and intention of this country was originally, is the mission statement of the Library of Congress, so that we would correct ourselves when we go the wrong way, and to be creative in the future, because as you've learned from the Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp, creativity is one of the strongest and best keys to happiness. And speaking of happiness, Mom, it is now 7:29 p.m.
And we always watch the sunset.
We watch the sunset every night.
Yes.
It's been going down about 7:38, 7:40
Yes. And
in Los Angeles.
that's one of our routines and that are special.
I haven't seen the hummingbirds in a while.
I'm not sure what happened to them, but I'm sure
Okay,
they're
Mom.
around.
Well, it's really an honor and a pleasure to spend this special, unique time in human history with you, Mom.
Thank you.
Thanks for being my podcast partner. Is there any words of wisdom or advice you'd like to give to the people of the earth?
Oh, hug your mom.
That says it all. Hug your mom often. Yeah, I wrote the joke that these are tough times for me because I'm a hugger and nobody wants to be hugged right now. But the truth of that is that I have my mother and we're hugging at least a dozen times a day.
Yeah.
So it's good to hug your mom right now.
Yes, and stay safe.
Okay, Mom, I love you very much.
Love you too, honey.
Hey, everybody. Long may you run. And shalom, amigos. Amigas. Hooray for humanity.
Tom Rhodes, you're a funny man. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedian. Tom Rhodes, karate kick, baby, oh yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're a groovy dude. You go all around the world, telling jokes to all of the people. You are an international comedian. You're funny to everybody in every single country in the world. Tom Rhodes, I like you very much. I think you're talented and very wonderful. Tom Rhodes, you're the best guy in the world. I wanna be your friend. You should call me sometime. Here is my phone number, 603-644-0048. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedic sensation. Tom Rhodes, I like to listen to your podcast. Tom Rhodes, you're the best man to ever walk on the earth.